go as your schedule allows. We'd like to encourage you to participate in as much of the conversation and discussion today as you can, but we understand if you may have to come and go. So first off, welcome everyone to the Are You With the Band, a discussion of book challenges across the nation. I'm Kate Radowski. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the Dean of University Libraries here at A&M Corpus Christi. $20. Mary and Jeffco Library is excited to offer this program today. It's a topic we've been having internal discussions about in our library, with our library colleagues for quite a while. So we're really grateful for your attendance and your interest in this discussion as well. A discussion about the ramp-up of challenge banned books across our nation is really critical right now. The American Library Association estimates that book challenges in 2021 increased by approximately 573%, from 156 in 2020 to 729 in 2021. In addition, the number of titles that were challenged rose by approximately 484%, from 273 to 1,597. I do think the pandemic and this just very strange nature of 2020 probably influenced the 2020 numbers slightly. So I think what's important is that we look back to 2019. 2019 numbers, 377 challenges and 566 titles. Again, that's versus 2021, where there was 729 challenges and 1,597 titles. So while 2020 may have been an anomaly, there's a clear indication that this is becoming more acceptable and more of a societal norm for people to choose for other people what they read. Trying to keep my bias on that. Book challenges and censorship are on the rise significantly. A discussion around why this may be happening and what the consequences of this are is fundamental to a free society that has the privilege of the right to read. Today, we're going to hear from the Texas State Library Association, as well as local community partners and TAMUCC faculty and students regarding this topic. And we ask you to explore these notions in your own head, and we welcome questions. We really want to have some dialogue. We ask that you remember the code of conduct you signed when you registered today. And we also encourage you to look at the screen behind me to view the schedule, the presenters' bios, and to take a link to the feedback form that we'd like to ask you to complete when this is done. Okay, so we are now going to take, I think, a really short break to get our technology set up, because we're going to live stream the presentation from the Texas Library Association, and then we'll be back. So just give us like 5 minutes. Okay. Surprise, it's already streaming. So I think in the interest of wanting to allow time for discussion and questions, we're going to go ahead and invite our TLA participants to start their portion of the presentation. So please join me in welcoming our first guest today, Shirley Robinson. Shirley is the executive director of the 6,000-member Texas Library Association, a position she's held since January of 2020. I had the honor of being the chair of TCAP, the Texas Council of Academic Libraries, during our inaugural year and during the pandemic. So we've got, I think, a fairly unique bond about some trauma from moving a conference from in person to online and having to go through what we did. So prior to coming to TLA, she was president and CEO of Texas Healthcare Trustees, a statewide trade association serving more than 4,000 hospital board members. Shirley also spent 8 years in progressive leadership roles in THT and the Texas Hospital Association, serving as Senior Director of Education and Programs at THT and as Vice President of Education and Governance Programs at THA. Shirley also held business development and fundraising memberships, education and marketing positions at nonprofits, including the Texas Society for Association Executives, Muscular Dystrophy Association, and the Austin Museum of Art. She received a bachelor's degree in business administration from Trinity University and is a certified associate executive. Please welcome Shirley.
Sure, there's an association for everything. It's so great to be here with you all today. We're really excited to have this conversation. Congratulations on being here and making the time and getting out in the rain, all of that good stuff. We want to thank TAMUCC Corpus Christi, as well as Dr. Dowski, Patricia, and Jennifer for organizing the conversation today here at the Coastal Bend. You're about to hear a lot of really interesting pieces of information about the censorship battles, and really whether you're a student or an educator, a faculty member, a community member, a civic leader, a public library and director, the conversation today has impact on policies and processes for the future, as well as politics that we're all seeing for now. And it's also going to have a huge impact on the interpretation and application of the First Amendment for the future. So we know that's why we're all here today. The availability of materials of all library types and in all libraries, and even academic freedom and academic tenure are at stake. So as Kate just mentioned in her statistics, censorship has always been a factor in our work in libraries, but over the last year, and really coming up on the anniversary of the Krauss list that was released on October the 25th, partners across the state, along with the Texas Library Association, have been in the fight of our lives to protect these rights for the freedom to read. So I'm going to now turn it over to our TLA president for 2022 and 2023, Mary Woodard, to take us through the journey that started on October the 25th, and we'll be able to take questions at the end. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. So glad to be with you here today. Let me see if I can get my presentation. Okay. Well, it is great to be here with you this afternoon on this rainy day. It's good to be inside instead of out. In the rain, and I really want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about this very important topic. I can't guarantee that my bias will not show. As a librarian and president of the Texas Library Association, I probably will have a little bias. But because we are in the midst of an existential crisis, this is going to have what's happening right now is going to have an effect on education and libraries for many years to come. Just a little bit about me. I am Mary Woodard. I am recently retired from Mesquite ISD, which is in the DFW area. I served there for 35 years and then retired in May. I served as an elementary and middle school librarian, and then my last 20 years with the district, I served as director of library services. So Mesquite has about 35,000 students and almost 50 libraries, 55 librarians that I supervised, and in all of that time, I think I can count on one hand the number of book challenges that we had that went all the way through the reconsideration process. Now, we had, from time to time, we would have a parent express a concern that we were able to resolve informally by explaining that that parent absolutely has the right to say what their own child reads, but they do not have the right to say what every parent's child reads. And they understood that, and they felt validated as a parent, and they went on their way happy. But what we're seeing right now is on a whole different level. So we're going to be talking about that, and I'm going to share with you some things that we've been seeing happen. So, the Texas Library Association. Our association was founded in 1902, so we are a 120-year-old organization. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we have about 5,200 members from all library types: school libraries, public libraries, academic libraries, and special libraries, which are like law libraries, museum libraries, corporate libraries. Almost every organization has some kind of archive where they keep their things, and so they need librarians to manage that. And we are the largest state library association in the country. So we're very proud of that. We have a fabulous conference that we do every year where we have lots of speakers and authors come, and librarians give presentations. And it is a fabulous conference, and it is on par with the American Library Association conference. And I see some people nodding. If you've been to both of those, you know that TLA is right up there on level with the national conference. Our mission in TLA, as you can see on the screen, is to amplify voices of the library community through advocacy, education, and intentional equity, diversity, and inclusion. And one of the ways we accomplish this mission is by communicating the value of libraries. So our goal is to remind people that libraries were the original educational institution. Way back in the day, before we had public schools, we had people that had collections of books, and the way they educated themselves was through reading. And so libraries are really the original educational institution. And TLA wants to remind folks of that, and also that the library still plays a part in developing an informed and educated citizenry. We also want to promote and defend access to trustworthy, authoritative, and diverse resources for our communities. And so that's really the piece that we're talking about today. So intellectual freedom. The definition from the American Library Association, and I'm going to try not to use acronyms today. Librarians, we have our acronyms that we like to use. So if I use an acronym and you're not sure what it is, you can call me out on it and I'll tell you what it is. But the American Library Association, or the ALA, says that intellectual freedom is the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. And it's interesting to note that the First Amendment, of course, to the Constitution, and Article 1, Section 8 of the Texas Constitution protect this right for everyone. And there is case law that holds that intellectual freedom is a fundamental right not only of adults, but also of children. Intellectual freedom is the basis of our democratic society. In the United States, we are expected to be self-governing. And in order to do that, you have to be well-informed. And libraries not only provide ideas and information, but they're also part of the educational system that teaches the critical thinking skills that people use to inform themselves. Intellectual freedom is a core value of the library profession. And you can't talk about intellectual freedom without talking about censorship. Censorship is the suppression of ideas and information because someone finds those ideas or that information objectionable or inappropriate. It's when someone says, you can't read that book because I object to it. Censorship is addressed in the Library Bill of Rights. And I know a lot of you here are students here at the university, so I want to explain that librarians have additional training. Most professional librarians have a master's in library science, and in that training, one of the documents that we study is the Library Bill of Rights, which gives, it has several articles, and it really informs the type of service that we provide and our professional ethics as librarians. And so the Library Bill of Rights was first adopted by the American Library Association in 1939. So this founding document has been around for quite a while. And Article 3 says that libraries should challenge censorship in the fulfillment of their responsibility to provide information and enlightenment. So in other words, it is our professional duty as librarians to stand up for people to have access to the reading materials that they think are appropriate for themselves. Okay, so these headlines reflect the current climate around the state. You may have seen some of these recently. We started seeing book challenges happening in school districts in early 2021. And what was happening at that point is that organized political groups like Moms for Liberty, there was a group called No Left Turn in Education. They were providing lists of books that they found inappropriate to their members and encouraging their members to go out and see if any of their school libraries had these books, and then they encouraged them to go to school board meetings and read passages from the books out loud in the meetings, bypassing any district policy regarding library materials. Typically what happens if some librarians and teachers and educators, we are always happy to partner with parents in providing materials for students. But as I said before, one parent cannot say what every child in the school reads. They have the right to do that for their own child, but not for every other parent's child. And all districts have a district policy that's approved by the school board that handles these kinds of conflicts, or and it's called a reconsideration policy. So if a parent has a concern about a book, what is supposed to happen is they go to their school librarian. The librarian can explain to them the purpose that the book serves in the library, whether it is for curriculum support or it's for self-selected reading, those kinds of things. And if the parent is still not satisfied and thinks it should be removed, there is an official form that they can fill out. And then what we call a reconsideration committee is put together. And that committee is made up of teachers on the campus. It's made up of the librarian, the principal, and there's usually a parent. And if it's at the high school level, sometimes they even will have a student on that committee. Those committee members read the book in full, and there are certain things that they look for to determine whether the book meets the selection policy of the school. Every district has a library selection policy. Librarians don't just choose things for the campus just based on their own ideas about what kids might like to read. There is a selection policy that has criteria that they use when they're selecting items for the library. That's all of the training that we have as librarians. We are taught how to do that in graduate level courses. So the committee reviews the book. They look at all of these different criteria. They see if the book meets the selection policy. If it does, then the recommendation would be that it stays on the shelf. If maybe they see that for some reason, like for example, at one point in my district, we moved 6th graders from elementary school to middle school. Well, that changes the kind of collection that you need to have in the library. So all of the books that were purchased with sixth graders in mind, we moved those to the middle school level as much as we could. But, maybe we missed one, and a parent finds it and says, I don't think this is appropriate. The committee agrees, so we move it up to middle school. Or it may be that we remove it altogether. Whatever the committee recommends, that's what we do. So these political groups were bypassing that process completely, going straight to the school board. And what was happening is that many of the school board's members, instead of directing that person to follow the process, they did not follow their own process and just automatically said, oh, goodness, you're right, this is terrible, we need to pull this out of the library. So that is where all of this kind of started. They also encouraged their members to submit public information requests. I don't know if you're aware, but any email, memo, any kind of communication, a document that is created in a school district is subject to public information requests. So they directed their people to submit public information requests about the books. They wanted to see book orders that libraries had turned in. They wanted to see, some of them even asked for lists of all of the books in the library, which, we said, well, it's in the online catalog. But that, so it caused a lot of, it caused a lot of extra work for district staff, librarians. They were not able to do their jobs working with kids on campus because they were busy filling a lot of these public information requests. Then in October, as Shirley mentioned, our House Representative, Matt Krause, who was chair, and I don't know if he still is or not, he's not anymore, but he was chair at that time of the House Committee on General Investigating. So basically this committee, anything they wanted to investigate, they could investigate. So he sent a letter to school superintendents around the state saying that he was initiating an inquiry into school district library content. And as Director of Library Services, when my superintendent got that, he forwarded it directly to me and said, we need to have a conversation about this. And seeing that letter on government, stationery, house investigation it just kind of made my blood run cold. It was, I've never seen anything like this before. It kind of brings to mind authoritarian governments in other countries, McCarthyism, those kinds of you hear government investigation. Those are the kind of things that you think of. And I just thought, I never thought in the United States of America we would have government officials investigating the kinds of books that we have in school libraries, but that's where we were. And his letter included a list of 850 books, and it asked three things. He wanted to know, or his committee wanted to know, how many copies of each book the district owned, at what campuses were they located, how much money the district had spent to acquire the books on the list, and then number 3 was just great. Any other books in the district having to do with sexuality, HIV/AIDS, or containing material that might make students feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or psychological distress because of their race or sex. I don't know about you, but that's a pretty subjective. I don't know that I could go to a library and determine, what's going to make Shirley feel discomfort and anguish. So, but that, and that language came from a bill that was passed in the previous legislative session where teachers were not allowed to talk in their classrooms about things that might make students feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or psychological distress. So that's where that came from. There were a variety of responses to this request. Some districts, including my own, did not respond at all. We did put our answer together in case we were forced to reply and respond. We were not. Some districts went beyond what was requested and required that their librarians review every book in the collection, looking for what they call pervasively vulgar materials. And then we even had some public libraries that, I know of one example where a public library closed for a few days so that they could go through their entire children's collection to make sure that they did not have any of the 850 books that were on this list. So then the governor jumped into the conversation, espousing the view that Texas schools were providing pornography to students and directing the Texas State Library and Archives Commission and the Texas Education Agency, which are both state agencies that oversee school libraries, directing them to develop standards that would prevent this from happening, which we already have standards. We have collection development policies. We have a lot of things. And you know, being in education and libraries for 35 years, I can pretty much say we are not putting pornography in our school libraries. So anyway, that's what happened there. Here's some more headlines. Since then, and that was in, I don't know, late 2021, early 2022, when the governor requested that. Since then, Texas has had more book bans than any state in the country. Librarians have faced harassment and are leaving the profession. Some cities are defunding their public libraries and shutting them down. We've even seen police reports filed on librarians, and we've seen law enforcement officials coming into libraries looking for obscene books. And this has happened in school and public libraries. So it is a very serious situation. If you are someone who cares about the First Amendment, learning, education, it is a very serious topic. So what has TLA been doing? We've done a lot of advocacy and outreach. As I said, one of our goals is to communicate the value of libraries in our schools and communities. And so we have been promoting the fact that librarians have extensive training in collection development and selection of resources that meet the varied needs of all members of their community, and that there are already processes in place for the reconsideration of library materials. We have put out official statements on the freedom to read. You can see a screenshot of one of our statements there. We also put out a statement on the Parental Bill of Rights. Members and TLA staff have testified at Texas State Library and Archives Commission hearings about the things that are happening. We have sent letters to the TEA, Texas Education Association, TSLAC, which is the state library, the State Board of Education, the Texas House General Investigating Committee members. We have sent letters to them, giving them information about libraries and how selection works. We've had discussions with TASB, which is the Texas Association of School Boards, the Texas PTA, the ACLU of Texas, the Texas Association of Professional Educators, the Media Coalition, the Authors Guild, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and the National Coalition Against Censorship. So we've had conversations and discussions with all of those folks. Some of our members also, you may have seen, if you're a Twitter or Instagram user, you may have seen the hashtag Freedom, FREADOM. And there, some of our members put together a social media campaign. They are called the Freedom Fighters, and they are tweeting out positive stories about how books and reading influence people's lives. So those are some things that we've been doing. We also have been putting together some tools and resources for people. We've curated and updated the resources that are on our Texas Library Association website. We've got, on that page, we've got recordings of some webinars that we've done on the topic. One that was really that I would encourage you to check out if this is something of interest to you, but it had attorneys from the Texas Association of School Boards and someone from the Texas Municipal League, and they addressed the legal aspects of intellectual freedom and censorship. So that one was really very informative. We've had articles in all of our TLA publications. We participated in a National Freedom to Read Roundtable in partnership with Macmillan Publishers. We had a lot of sessions about this topic at our annual conference that was in Fort Worth last April. Another resource that we offer our TLA members is professional liability insurance. For $42 a year, you can get professional liability insurance that will provide you with legal assistance if you are in a situation where concerning censorship, First Amendment, things like that. And one of our big successes is we put together an intellectual freedom helpline. And this is a program where we have volunteer members who have been through a reconsideration process before. And so if someone calls and they are interested in getting help from the helpline, they are connected with one of these volunteers just to have a listening ear, somebody to that they can vent to, they can explain the situation to, and that person can give them guidance, just provide support for them, help them maybe find resources. You know, when you have an angry person in your face talking to you about how this book is terrible, you know, it becomes hard sometimes to think of even what to say. And so our helpline volunteers really kind of help calm the person down, help them find resources that they need, help them know what to say, those kinds of things. So that has been very effective. And I think we have helped, 20? About 20 people that we have responded to their requests, and we've connected them with someone. So what is the impact of all of this on our communities? Well, before I do that, you've heard a lot of information. I want to help you process it a little bit. Turn to someone next to you and just, what are you thinking and feeling about what you've heard so far? Let's just take a couple minutes to do
Every vibration of
I know that wasn't very long. That's such a big topic. I looked at the time and I think I'm over my time. So just real quickly, impact on our communities. We've got books and things being removed without going through established policies. I was talking to a librarian that I know the other day, and she was sharing that last year she did a big fundraising campaign. Her library, her district is one that does not provide the same amount of money to every library in the district. It's based on local principal discretion. And so she had done a big fundraising campaign, and she had made like $5,000, and she was so excited, and she bought all of these books that her kids were excited about, lots of graphic novels, things that they were excited about reading. And when she came back to school and she had all these new books sitting there, her administration said, you can't put those out for the kids until we review all of those. So books are sitting there. Kids can't access them because they haven't been officially approved by the district to go on the shelf, even though she is a professional librarian with an MLS. She followed the selection policy to choose all of these books, yet she was not allowed to put them out. Things like this cause what we call soft censorship, which is where librarians, they may think twice before purchasing something that could possibly be deemed problematic by people in the community, even if they know that those books would meet the needs of the people that they are serving. They think twice about, do I really want to buy this so it might upset somebody? Public trust. Libraries have always been seen as a valued institution in our communities, and public trust in libraries and librarians is being eroded. Important voices and viewpoints are being marginalized and pushed to the side. And some of our students are no longer seeing themselves and their lived experiences reflected on the shelves of our libraries, especially if the experiences that they have had are outside of what some might consider normal or traditional. So learning and our ability to inform themselves as required by a democratic society, that is all, of course, negatively impacted. And as I said, librarians are leaving the profession, and sometimes they're being replaced with non-certified staff who may not understand the concepts of intellectual freedom, censorship, and collection development. So this has a really huge impact on our communities. So what can you do? You can join Texans for the Right to Read. This is a coalition that was put together by TLA. We now have about 3,200 members. It is totally free to join. You don't have to pay anything. The only thing that happens is you get an email every once in a while giving you some education about these topics. We've got steering committees in different areas of the state, Austin, Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, and El Paso. And if there is a censorship issue in any of these areas, then, and you live in that area, you will get an email letting you know what is going on and giving you some talking points for things that you might say if you went to a county commissioners meeting or a board meeting, or if you wanted to write an email, it will give you some things that you might say. And our slogan with Texans for the Right to Read is that no single book is right for everyone, but one book can make a significant difference in someone's life. So if you would like to join, you can use that QR code right there, and it will take you to the little form that you fill out to get on our email list and to join our coalition. All right, I'm going to leave that up here, but that is the end of my presentation, and do you have any questions?
Could I read something real quick?
Mm-hmm.
So, sorry, I pulled up this webpage. So, if you Google Book Riot 850, some of y'all may have seen it. There's an article, the 850 books, an analysis, and it is an analysis. It's a long article. And about halfway down, or maybe at some point in the article, there's a subheading, the books that aren't on this list. I'm just going to read a couple short paragraphs if that's okay. The trouble with making an 850 book list of titles to challenge is that it looks comprehensive. One would assume that it covers everything you want it to. So it's interesting to look at the books that aren't on this list. Probably the strangest example I've bumped into is that Dying to Live, in parentheses, Elite Operatives number 4, An adult lesbian adventure romance series is on this list, but just volume 4. Are the other books in the series allowed? And more importantly, are adult romance novels okay in general, but just not this one? Here's that second little paragraph I'm going to read real quick, shorter. Of course, The Hunger Games isn't listed, and neither is Battle Royale. After all, stories about kids killing each other doesn't cause students discomfort and clothes. But a book that mentions a character's gay uncle is apparently scarring.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We've never been able to exactly find out where that list came from. It appears to be cobbled together from a lot of different sources. And, the topics that are on that list are all, like you said, there's really nothing about violence or anything. They all have to do with sex and sexuality, abortion, LGBTQ, sexual assault, civil rights, race, racial equality, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that are on that list of 850 books. And like you said, there are some that are very strange. There was like a medical reference book that was on there. So it's very, very strange. Any other questions?
I just wanted to make the comment that it's been brought up about public libraries and school libraries, but this is coming to the community college and the universities. Just be ready. This is not stopping at that level. I'm a librarian for Del Mar College, and we've already started talking about it in we have districts, and we've already started talking about it.
Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I was looking into, there is a proposed new selection policy for school board policy, the part of the school board policy that's come in. Have you addressed that with?
When the governor asked the Texas Education Agency and the state library to develop standards, what the TEA did was they put out a model school selection policy. And what it looked like to me, now this is just my own opinion, what it looked like to me was they took their textbook selection policy and tried to apply it to libraries. So, it had things in it like every book will be read in its entirety. Well, as librarians that select maybe sometimes 600 books a year for a high school library, that is not possible. It also required that the school board approve every library's individual book order before it is placed, which puts a huge burden on the business office and the purchasing department. There were just a lot of things in that policy that were problematic. And we've heard that only 3 districts in the state have adopted that policy. So that's good news. That's good news. The Texas Association of School Boards also revised their policy. And so before, their policy was instructional materials selection. So it included anything in the classroom and library materials. But so they gave an option to split that out. So districts could have a split policy, one for instructional materials and one for library materials if they wanted to, or they could keep the combined one that they had. So yes, there have been some policies, and districts are now in the process of looking at those and deciding which way they want to go.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Mm-hmm. When you pointed out during your presentation that the governor asked for these things and you're like, we're already doing them, did anyone reply to them and say, this is what we do already, this is how
Not really. My sense is that when you get a directive from the governor, you just do it. Yeah.
you rework the wheel?
Right. Well, and actually what the state library did, which is where the school library standards live, they are under the state library umbrella. And so what they did was they, what would you call that, guidance? They wrote some guidance for collection development that they sent out to everyone. And right now they are in the process of, they have reopened, they're going to revise pieces of the standards that have to do with collection development. And so right now they are in the process of putting together a committee that has
not only librarians on it, which is who basically wrote the standards. They were written by librarians, but they opened it up to school administrators and community members, parents, people like that, so that they can also have input, which is great. More input is better.
Do you know if anyone's talked to the students about the books that are being removed?
Not specifically. I don't know. I mean, I know that there have been students that have gotten up and spoken at school board meetings talking about how, this is wrong and that everybody needs to be reflected in materials that are available in the library. So I know that some students are aware of what is happening, especially at the high school level.
Is there an avenue that students would have to advocate for certain books?
Or some type of focus groups, maybe?
Well, I mean, students are welcome to join our Texas for the Right to Read, and we encourage that. This group is a grassroots coalition of anybody that, it's not just for librarians, it is for community members, anyone that is concerned about this and is interested in making sure that everybody keeps the right to read and learn as they see fit.
So, if I may, at the collegiate level, within our system, students have the opportunity to apply for a Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board student representative position, and they bring up issues that affect higher ed as a whole. In fact, here at A&M Corpus Christi, we're currently in the recruiting process to try to have students apply for that position. It is a position that is appointed by the governor, but each collegiate system, right, like the A&M system, UT system, Texas State system, and so forth, has that opportunity. So I don't know which students you were talking about, if you're high school level or the public school, but at the collegiate level, there's an opportunity for students to be involved in that regard.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Those are great questions.
Add on to the student question. I think it's an important opportunity for students to be able to attend school board meetings, especially when there's a library topic on the agenda. We monitor many school board meetings across the state, and it's really powerful and impactful when students are able to show up and just speak from the heart about why it's important to follow the existing policies, to have materials in the collection that apply to all students, not just some. So that's really where their voice is going to be best served. And also just checking in with their librarian to see what they can do to help support. Talk to the superintendent, talk to the principal and the leadership of the school.
Right, I think I saw one more hands somewhere. Yes.
Yeah, so we have an election coming up, and we talked about what Governor Abbott has to say about these things, but I know there's a lot of issues for politicians to talk about, but at every level, you know of what Idaho has to say, and I'm sure you're not familiar with who's running in Corpus and what they have to say, but I know that there are a board of election, board of schools, somebody education, thank you. Yeah, so we do have some people are up for election.
Right.
So
this is why it's great to have libraries and people who are critical thinkers, so they can do that research and they can find out what their candidates have to say on this. This is why it's so important that we have people that read and educate themselves on these topics.
And if you look at Vote 411, where they ask the candidates questions for school board races, this is absolutely a question that is on, that list of questions. I just voted yesterday and checking out my candidates where I live, and every single one of them running for school board had to answer the question of what do they feel is important about the selection of library materials. So look deep and do your research.
Yep, those guides are actually at the information desk, so anybody who's here on campus right now, if you want to go down the way on a break, we've got those guides.
We've been
Library.
Yeah,
library. There's library too, but there's close proximity.
And if I can add to that, if you go to vote411.org, you enter in your address, those voter guides you're talking about, you can access them online. This year I've noticed that It's not great at picking up the most local of races, which the school boards would fall under.
But that's because the politicians take them in time for the deadlines.
For the local elections, you can go to League of Women Voters, Corpus Christi,
The
and I think they've
Vote
got-
411 is the League of Women Voters project.
Yes, but it's not, the Corpus Christi League of Women Voters will have the local one. And at the public library, we have the voter's guide with the local one.
Yeah, we have both.
So,
We have at our library the statewide guide and the local guide.
So, yeah.
It's still our
They're doing
Well, thank you all so much. This has been a great conversation and really appreciate the opportunity.
All right. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back from your break. Please continue to help yourself to some snacks and drinks as we continue the program. I want to one last time thank our partners from TLA for being here. I think that was a really informative presentation, and so thank you so much. They traveled far for us, and we appreciate it. So. Okay, next I would like to introduce our panel moderator, who will in turn introduce the panelists. Amanda Marquez is an assistant professional professor and university seminar coordinator in the first year Learning Communities program at TAMUCC. A social historian by training, Professor Marquez is a proud alumna, having earned both her BA and MA in history here at TAMUCC. She has been working in the first year Learning Community program since 2008. Her areas of specialization include Mexican American history, women's history, and the history of gender and sexuality. Professor Marquez has received several awards for her teaching, including the Teaching Excellence Award for the Department of Interdisciplinary Studies and the College of Liberal Arts in recognition of utilizing high-impact practices in teaching and mentoring first-year students, as well as the university's Teaching Innovation Award. She has published articles on Wikipedia as a tool for learning, research, and writing in upper level history undergraduate courses and HSI in South Texas. Please join me in welcoming Professor Marquez as our moderator.
Thank you, Kate. All right. Well, thank you for being here today to hear from our wonderful panelists. So I'm going to just going to start. All right. Our first panelist is Dr. Shane Gleason. He is an associate professor of political science. He also serves as the coordinator for the political science and pre-law programs. His scholarly interest centers on identity and language and judicial decision-making. He has published 17 articles and book chapters. His first book came out in early 2022. I'm a English teacher and a past Digital Innovator of the Year Award recipient. Dr. Gleason routinely teaches civil rights and liberties for those questions of censorship. Our next panelist is Dante Gator. He's from Dallas, Texas, and is a senior at Texas A&M Corpus Christi, majoring in marine biology and minoring in creative writing. Dante has served as the president of the Black Student Union, received the Islander Cultural Alliance's Spirit of MLK Award in 2019, is part of the McNair Scholars Program, the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation Research Program, and is currently the lead coordinator for the campus's unofficial library book club, Overbooked. Dante was thrilled to join the panel and seeks to light a spark of hope to the readers and literary community members who might be worried about the recent push to ban books. Books have always been a big part of Dante's life, living in an academic household. As a child, he would read mostly nonfiction and historical documents other than X-Men comics. But now, finds himself reading science fiction, stories like Dune, and classics like Crime and Punishment, and still the X-Men comics. Good choice. His favorite author at the moment is Tiffany D. Jackson, and his favorite book is The Trail of Ivy by Rebecca Brooks. Our third panelist is Michelle Dallas. She has a master's in information and library science from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She has worked for the Corpus Christi Public Libraries for 33 years, half of which was as a children's librarian in Greenwood Branch, Central Library, Parkdale Branch, and the other half as the managing librarian at the Nayland Public Library. She has been a selector of material for her branch in both positions. She has often been on the library review panel for materials challenged at CCPL. Ms. Vallis helps to facilitate the Nayland Library Band Book Club since 2007. She helps to facilitate that, sorry. And she has been a long-time supporter of the American Library Association Bill of Rights and Freedom Treaty. Welcome. And lastly, we have Dr. Bethany Fletcher. Dr. Fletcher is an associate professor of reading education. Her research interests include literacy coaching, the design and implementation of reading clinics on university and elementary school campuses, and supporting emergent and early readers who experience reading difficulties. Dr. Fletcher has published over 30 articles and book chapters and actively presents at many conferences. Dr. Fletcher is an editor for the Literacy, Research, and Instruction, and was also recently awarded the Jack Cassidy Service Award from the Texas Association for Literacy Education and the Digital Innovator of the Year Award from TAMUCC. Welcome, Dr. Fletcher. All right, so we have some questions for our esteemed panelists, and feel free to comment as you wish to. All right, so the first question is: in Michigan, a public library faced shutting down as a result of residents voting against a tax to fund library operations. This was culminated as a result of a protest that began due to the library's inclusion of Genderqueer, a memoir by Maya Kulabi, the graphic novel about the author's experiences coming out as non-binary. The library director, after learning of the voting results, was quoted saying, "I knew that there were people that were upset about the material in the library, but I figured that enough people would realize that what they're trying to do with the removal of these books is antithetical to our Constitution, particularly the First Amendment." Do you have any thoughts on the library director's statements?
So at the Corpus Christi Public Libraries, we train our staff to listen to any complaint, as was mentioning earlier. And we do have a policy, collection development policy, so don't worry. And right in the front, I have copies of the reconsideration form. So, and one of the questions I always find interesting is, have you read the entire item? Yes, I'm sorry. If not, what parts did you read or review? Because, how seriously can I take it as a librarian if you haven't read the whole thing and haven't seen the whole point of what the author is trying to say, and get to the end of the story? Because, there's so much that is in a book, and if you take out the parts, sometimes you're missing the point. That's from the
So, whenever I see, book challenges, and I have before, during the break, I was telling Jennifer Anderson about a colleague of mine who does research on book bans, and they've shown me some of the challenge forms that they've gotten over the course of their research, and have you read the entire work was often blank, where the reason for not wanting this work to be on the shelf is that it offends a deeply held belief. And I always go back to this line written by a classical legal theorist, J.S. Mill, in the 1850s, and he wrote that the only belief for which we have warrants is that which we expose the entire world to prove unfounded. So basically, if we just get rid of ideas we don't like, we can't say necessarily that we believe those things we say we believe, and the only way to know that for sure is to expose yourself to ideas you don't agree with. And while the U.S. Constitution and the First Amendment don't require a library to stock every single possible book, if you remove some works just because you don't want books, with gay people in them, but you're totally okay with Battle Royale, right? Then at that point, you're engaging in what we call viewpoint discrimination, which is when the government allows some speech, but not other speech. When we're talking about libraries, public libraries, therefore government entities, we are engaging in viewpoint discrimination. Historically, the courts have never looked favorably upon viewpoint discrimination.
The next question is, locally in the Corpus Christi Independent School District and in the West Oso Independent School District, there have been complaints raised and requests to ban titles such as Beloved by Toni Morrison, The Kite Runner by Khaled Hosseini, and Out of Darkness by Ashley Bettis, just to name a few. These books and many others that were included on the list presented to these ISDs were identified due to sexual scenes that were deemed age inappropriate. These titles also have diverse characters from different racial backgrounds, and many have LGBTQIA+ characters. If any, what effect would removing such titles have on students attending these schools? Bethany or Dante, you would like to address this particular issue?
I will, yeah, and in our courses, and I've taught our children's literature courses to our pre-service teachers for several years, and we talk a lot about, mirror and window books, right? Children need to see themselves in books. They need to see others in books, a wide variety of people, different families, such as, Daddy Roommate or Heather Has Two Mommies. We talk about books like this, which often kind of freak our pre-service teachers out a little bit because they think, how am I supposed to use these in a public school, right? So we have a lot of conversations around that. But taking away these books from children is detrimental. I mean, it's obviously very detrimental to, it has a harmful impact because we heard earlier about intellectual freedom, right? They have a right to have access to a diverse range of stories and perspectives. These books also deny our students an opportunity, again, just to learn about their world, right? We need them to be interactive with their world, and taking away these books presents a very limited view of what their world looks like, and that's just not fair. One author, and I can't remember who it was, but in one of the articles I had read on some of the most recent book bans, she said the books are just a pretext, that this is a proxy war on students who share the marginalized identities on the authors and characters in the books under attack. So obviously there's a larger goal here, right? It's more about just books, right? And then what about the authors? So we're forgetting about these marginalized authors who, it's been wonderful in children's, when I graduated in the late 90s, most of the books I saw in classrooms and that I was using in the late 90s were written by white people with white experiences, very limited, view of families. So it's been wonderful to see the huge shift in the availability of books that are out there, and they're here and they're wonderful. There's some, if you don't read children's literature, young adult literature, you're really missing out because it is the best, right? Yeah. It's the best. I mean, hello, everybody. Yeah, please don't get alarmed for those books as a teacher so that my fourth graders wouldn't come to school the next day and ruin the plot for me, right? Yeah, I mean, they are just the best written books, and so we're denying these authors opportunities to get their works out there. So it's a sad state of affairs.
What I would say is kind of relating back to you were saying, it's very important for people to see themselves in books, because that's one of the basis that we judge if we want to read a book, we can relate to it or not. So I know, at least for me, the things I like to read things that I can understand or that I think about on a day-to-day basis. And I also think, as far as like school-wise, focusing on the impact that these books have with education and the classroom setting, it kind of like kids aren't dumb, you know, like they know what you're doing. So it's like, so if we're talking about like themes over and over again that really don't relate to us, they're going to get bored and they don't want to like listen to that and they're not going to care as much. But as well as like if you think of it in perspective of if you have a history class, right, and you're trying to read a book that has a controversial like topic, or that might be banned, right, and it goes along perfectly with your lesson, but you can't talk about it. So it's kind of like okay, so what happened during here? And it's just like, oh, well, I don't really know. I can't really talk about that. Why can't you talk about it? And so then it's like, it induces this, oh, well, this is how my teacher is. Or, oh, this is how this school is. And then they're going to go tell their friends, and their friends are going to go tell their parents, and their parents are going to bring up a bigger issue about it. So it's like, it's a chain system. So it's like a fire. You create this, like, banning books because of people who have different opinions and ideas. It's going to inevitably like return back on you. Like you can't contain it to just one subject or one type of theory. So it's like going to get out of control. So it induces like a state of fear in the classroom, in a state of like they don't really care about me, and that already lowers expectations as to like focus and like literacy rates and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just bad for everybody. So
Can I add? So you brought up history.
Yeah.
And Frank has been banned. So imagine explaining the Holocaust to people and you can't read Anne Frank. And they lose, part of reading is expanding your world, because I'm never going to experience the Holocaust, I hope and pray. But I can understand it. I can realize, wait a minute, I don't want to be part of the Holocaust, so I'll have empathy for people who are suffering from the Holocaust. And that's the power of reading, power of the books, and why we love to read, because I might not ever make it to Antarctica, but I've read a book about penguins. She's got tango mixed.
I just want to quickly say I appreciate Dante kind of using the image of the fire. So I also think too, right, we light that fire of and the love of reading in our students, right, that carries forward throughout their whole life. And so I think it also it's that spark of intellectual curiosity, right? I teach mostly first-year students in the first-year learning communities program here at TAMUCC, and I had a student last week come in and ask me if Anne Frank if it was in the library here, because it was a book that they were not allowed to read in her school, and it was something that she wanted to read for herself. We spent a lot of time in that particular week talking about historical empathy, and we were connecting it to film, but I think ultimately it's about that passion, that fire you want to light, right? That spark you want to ignite, and that to learn, right? To learn more about the world, and societies, and identities, and places that are outside of your own experience. I really appreciated that. The next question is for Michelle. And so, Michelle, as a public librarian, could you talk a little bit more about the book selection process and what goes into these efforts and who makes these decisions?
So we have a whole collection development policy, and it outlines who the selectors are and what they're looking for, what resources they're using. So currently at Corpus Christi Public Libraries, we have at each branch, so as you know, we have 6 branches. So each branch has an adult services librarian, a managing librarian, and they're the youth services librarian. Managing librarian purchases for the adult collection, and youth services does young adult and children's collection. We're using the standard selection tools, so Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, Book List, and school library journals. Mainly, we're looking at positive reviews. So our policy says we will purchase from a positive review. Now, we also purchase based on patron requests. So you can come up and request, and if we've got the budget for it, this is one of the important little things is that budget. We will purchase because we consider that a positive review. Sometimes you're just curious about the book, but sometimes you want to build that empathy and read that you've heard about the book. Every book about Trump or Hillary or the Queen, I've had requests for. So not that I can buy them all because I have a budget and I want to buy all those bestsellers that everyone wants to buy to read too. So I'm working with that. And then we've got the shelving space issue because I am not the Library of Congress and I cannot every book that's ever published and then have the U.S. government build me a new building. So periodically we are meeting. So every 5 years we try to go through each of our collections at our branches and looking for things that are out of date, moldy. We have a whole criteria for that in here too. So yeah. Did I answer everything I needed to know? You're ready to come work for us?
Thank you for explaining that process. All right. This question is for really anyone on the panel. And the question is, are there books that you feel don't belong in public libraries? What about school or academic libraries?
I'm a little bit of an absolutist when it comes to the First Amendment, and I'm going to go back to that J.F. Mill quote. If you start saying this book doesn't belong, you're now engaging in viewpoint discrimination. So, I mean, hell, Mein Kampf belongs on the shelf. If somebody wants to put 50 Shades of Grey on the shelf, cool, whatever, you do you. Now, when you're getting into the K-12 libraries, constitutionally speaking, K-12 is different. Nobody can, arrest you, for using bad words, but you can sure as heck get a detention for using a bad word in a K-12 school. So K-12 schools, I'm not even going to comment on that one, but to me that area is murky. But not based on the content area that you disagree with.
So at the public library, yes, we do have a few that we do not collect. We do not collect university textbooks. You can go to Texas A&M. Also workbooks that anyone writes in, because they will invariably write in them, so we don't spend our money there. The readers' condensed books we don't collect. We get tons of donations of those, and they go on our book sale, mainly because we've got the real book. So why am I want to read the whole thing. Thank you very much. So that's about, I'm sure there's some other things that we don't collect, mainly because we don't think it is appealing to our community, because here we are in South Texas. So not every book that Dallas will collect would we collect. but that's what interlibrary loan is for. So for a small fee of $275, you can request it from any library in Texas. It used to be the whole USA, but the government, the Texas State Library's budget was cut by 80% back a few years ago, and so we can no longer offer that for free. So, just a small fee. Thank goodness we can still do it within Texas. Yes, and we have Dallas and Houston who have huge collections and lots of libraries. And that's an interesting thing about how the libraries are set up in Texas, because here Corpus Christi Public Library is a city governed or provided for. So through your city property taxes, you get a free library card. If you live in Nueces County, you do not get a free library card with us because you don't live in Corpus Christi. So that was a big surprise to a lot of people. Nueces County used to provide for a small fee to the city library cards to their residents, but again, budget cuts, so that got cut too. So for a small fee of $25 a year, you can. If you move to Dallas, it'd be almost $50. So, but yeah, so budget is a big issue for the public.
One of the most common reasons for banning or challenging a book is due to age appropriateness. What does this mean to you, and is it a valid reason? To address this question.
I would love to talk about this question. Love to. First of all, I mean, age appropriateness, of course there are going to be books that might not belong in a first grade classroom, right? And that's why we train teachers. We train our teachers, why we have a children's literature course, a whole course that they take, a whole semester, so we can have them get their hands on a lot of what is out there and to help them make decisions about what will fit in their classroom in their particular situation, wherever they end up teaching. But I think as far as including books in classrooms, such as like in Tango Makes Three, if you've never read this one, it's a trade about the two male penguins who adopt a baby chick. It's beautiful. It'll get your tissues out. Beautiful story. But I think I heard somebody said earlier, we do not give kids enough credit at all. And I always tell my pre-service teachers that we do not get, and those who have children at home, you know how smart a 2-year-old is and a 3-year-old is. I've heard second graders say things that will blow me away in more sophisticated ways about a book than most adult friends that I have. Because they haven't been spoiled by life yet, right? They just put it all out there and share, and they overshare, and they make you think, and it's just lovely. So really, young children, which is primarily the age group I work with, they need to see the world as it is and not as the adults around them are telling them they need to see the world. Right? It's, they need to see the world as it is. Not as the adults who are removing these materials want them to see it. I don't see a problem in young children learning about civil rights movement or the Holocaust or different kinds of families. That's why we have all of these books about these issues written by skilled authors. And authors who write for children, very different than authors who write for adults, right? It takes if you ever watch a video about Roald Dahl, he will explain that very well to you, that it takes a very gifted person to write a book for children, right, versus adults. I also think about bibliotherapy. I'm looking at Leah Breyers right there, my former doctoral student who wrote her dissertation successfully, Dr. Leah Breyers, on using bibliotherapy with fourth graders. I mean, that's part of what books are for. Like I said, we use books to help us deal with our experiences in life. That's one of the reasons why we read. And also, I just wanted to comment too with age appropriateness and the question that Leah asked earlier, which not enough people are asking, is what are all the kids saying about all of
these book bans? I mean, we need to be asking the people that it's affecting the most. I want to hear what first and second graders are going to say about, why are you taking in Tango Makes 3 from my school library? I have a problem with this. So that's where I would be really curious to learn more information about.
Also, it's kind of like, there's also like the internet exists, so it's like, it's not just like books, so it's kind of like, oh, I don't want my kid learning about this. They're gonna learn about it either way, like one way or another. So it's just, where are you going, where do you want them to learn about it? Because they can either learn it by themselves, or learn it from friends, or they can learn it from you. So it's just like pick an avenue of which one you want them to learn. And then like with authors, if you do like an age appropriate banning for graphic content or challenging ideas or things that were once taboo that aren't taboo anymore, you know. Again, they're gonna get that agenda into books somehow. Like for instance, like because we were talking about why I like the X-Men comics so much is because it's like it talks about civil rights issues within like the mutants and humans, and I could relate to that. You know what I mean? So it was like, oh, okay, cool, yeah, I like this. I don't know why I like it, but something feels. So it's just kind of like they're going to get their agenda either way. So I mean, if you stop one door, they're just going to open up another one. So.
You can't be stopped, right?
At the Neal and Public Library, I run a banned book club. And some of these books we have presented at the banned book club. We just finished Frankenstein. And often these books are banned in high school, either the AP English or summer reading class, summer reading list, or required reading, but it's one of 10 options. And I am always amazed when I read, and it was for an AP English, because what was it about this book that the teacher thought her kids could handle? You know, it's a challenging book. I mean, not everyone can read something from 1816, like Frankenstein, when Frankenstein was written. I mean, it's interesting syntax and language usage and concepts. And so I just love that the teacher felt comfortable with her students to challenge them to read this. And sure, you know, we have a student who is, patron, who is fourth grader and reading at a 10th grade level. And so it's a challenge for us to find books that she's going to enjoy reading. And so what's age appropriate? And when I read something that was in the adult collection at that age, if I didn't understand it, it went over my head. I didn't care because I was there for the storyline that I understood. And now the student has a wonderful mother who is involved in what she's reading and is actually reading along with it, like Harry Potter. Oh my gosh, I remember when Harry came in and she was so excited that her son was in school so she could start reading the book ahead of him. But they had a conversation going on about the whole book. They had their own little book club and I wanted to join it. So, yeah, it's wonderful to see the options.
That you mentioned what is age appropriate with respect to that fourth grader reading at the 10th grade level. When I was a kid, I was reading at an adult level by the time I was in the 5th grade, and let's just say my teachers were not cool with that, in the slightest sense of the word. I really liked Stephen King at the time. No fewer than 5 or 6 meetings that my mom got called into. And to be honest, a lot went over my head. But it was, if you gave me something written for a 4th grader, it was, I could predict how Hatchet's going to end. Mention the Hatchet in the In the cockpit on page 1, that's where it's gonna go. And then at the end, like, called it. So if I had been restricted to just what was age appropriate, I probably would have just said, "To hell with it all." But so yeah, it sounds like a difficult question to solve. Fortunately, my mom was cool. Let me read whatever I wanted to.
Feeling ashamed. Probably shouldn't have read the Andrews as early as I did. This question is for Shane, or anyone that would like to comment. But the question is, in 2021, the American Library Association tracked 729 challenges of 1,597 book titles. For comparison, in 2020, the numbers were 156 challenges of 273 books. In 2019, it was 377 challenges to 566 books. In your opinion, why do you think there has been such a surge in challenging books?
So the surge in book challenges, you can kind of really goes back to the same place we've seen, in the past year, critical race theory become such a hot button issue. As a self-avowed critical scholar who actively teaches, critical theory, it's been around since the early 70s, and outrage over it is manufactured. Everyone's upset because critical theory is telling white people they need to hate themselves. I'm sorry, but I'm unaware of which foundational text that comes from. Can you please point me to it? And the book challenges, again, they're highlighted, brought to the fore, they're made salient, coupled with news stories that, if you read a story about LGBTQI plus youth, you're going to turn gay. If you read a story about the Hispanic experience or the Black experience, then you're going to learn to hate yourself, right? It's truly manufactured. It's in a lot of ways, it's a good way to mobilize political support. The old joke is one of the best ways to mobilize your political supporters is to play the Think of the Children card. And book bans are a really good way to, clutch the pearls and say, think of the children. Will this, what's that? Okay. Will this fade with time? Yeah, probably. I mean, these kinds of things tend to be cyclical, but again, if the policies are adopted, and there can be some pretty wide-ranging implications, because we look at these challenges have been going on for years. I have a friend who researches this stuff, and they've told me that it used to be this niche thing where they were requesting boxes of materials from school boards on challenges and stuff like that, and all of a sudden they're doing NPR interviews and stuff because it's become that salient. But it really does come from a place of manufacturing, mobilize supporters, create outrage, things of that nature.
Perspective comments or share their thoughts?
Yeah, I think also it's kind of like the new age way of thinking in the kind of the age of technology and the revolution and how much information people have. So now they can really go back into history and really look at documents and things that happen very easily, because they don't have to go all the way to a library. They don't have to go all the way to do something else. It's just right there on your phone. If you want to know, if I want to know something that happened 2 years ago, or not 2 years ago, I don't know, 100 years ago, I can just look it up. I don't have to go request, oh, do you have this? Do you have that? It's very easy. And so I think it's the increase in banning is the fear of information and what you're going to do with that information, and then the taking down or challenging of certain infrastructures that profit off of said theories and information that you're receiving. So once people figure out what these or whoever I don't want to say anybody in particular, but whoever is controlling these mantras and ideas of we need to withhold this innocence. And whoever's profiting off of that, once they understand what they're doing, they're going to start challenging and rivaling. So that's why they challenge and rival books that spark these ideas of, oh, well, maybe this isn't the way, or maybe there's a different way, or maybe there's like something else that we can do. So I think it's kind of like out of fear and desperation of being overthrown.
And something you just said reminds me, of another thing I could add is we're also, politically speaking, we're kind of in an age of populism. And what populism largely means is we have this deep distrust of institutions. So, time was, you go to the doctor, and the doctor says you have X, take this pill. The correct answer is yes, ma'am. But now it's like, we're seeing even this age of where institutions that we've historically trusted, the medical establishment, academia, libraries, that there's some hidden agenda that all of us up here are actively trying to destroy the world. I'm just trying to make sure my socks match each day.
And I wore my Dan. And you're right about the issue of being challenging libraries. I mean, we take our job seriously, and when people are just challenging our books, I mean, we've already thought about buying this book. I mean, do I really want to spend my money on this book compared to these other books? Because this is a $35 book, and these books altogether are $35. So should I be buying these 3 compared to this one? But I don't have a Frankenstein, and it's a classic. So, but these are also classics. So, I mean, we're not just arbitrarily spending money. We have a whole administration we have to respond to for what we are buying, how we are spending our money, and it's also in the city. And when it feels like an attack because we're so not used to it. But, we've already debated this. Do we have enough? I mean, is this a positive enough review? Is this something that's going to circulate? Because if it's sitting on a shelf and nobody's checking it out, why did I spend that money when I could have bought 3 other books for that? So we have our own criteria for what we are selecting, what we want to serve our community, what our community is expecting of us. Because if they're not finding it at the public library, then why are we spending tax money for the public library? But we want them to spend tax money on us because it serves so many people. I mean, our whole community, we are, oh my gosh, during the pandemic, we had so many people say, why aren't you opening books to read? I have to sit home, why can't I read books? They were so happy when we opened up again, and I've had so many compliments. Thank you so much for opening up. You saved things. Because I had this outlet to get out of my house by reading the book. Since I couldn't actually go to Tahiti or Antarctica and see the penguins. So, yes, this is the role of the public libraries, is to serve our community through education and recreational resources and, promote our community. So.
Okay, this question is for Dante. As a student, what is your response when you learn a title has been banned or challenged, or is one of the solutions for the aforementioned ISDs? The book has a mature content sticker on it and requires parental permission.
Well, honestly, it makes me want to read it. It's like, I don't know, I was discussing this with my friends, and it was just like, it feels like this idea really wasn't thought through, of like, what's the best way to get kids? Let's tell them not to read it No, like I even before this like issue became so big, just when people realizing what banned books there are and stuff, like I've never seen so many people talk about Kite Runner or To Kill a Mockingbird and stuff, like at lunch, just talking about it, so it's like, it's very, it's very, like, I guess, heartwarming to see that. But as far as the issues and, like, how does it make students feel? And they see, like I said, students understand and they see what's going on. They see, like, these silencing of voices of, especially things that they relate to. And some of these books are, like, a lot of people's only books that they read, only books that they know, and they really like relate to them and they really love them and they're some of their favorite books, so you're kind of even killing someone's passion to read by like withdrawing that for them, so but as far as banning and how the banning goes, like literally people, like if you go to like stores and stuff, some of these banned books are like bought out, like because it's having the opposite effect, so I think it's more so not my generation or not like the ones before, but kind of like after us. So the people who haven't read it, because if you put yourself, into like a student's shoes, right? Say like high school or middle school, and you have like a lot of homework you have to do, and you have like a test you got to study for and stuff, and then you go to your English class. It's just like, oh well, we can't read this. It's like, oh, okay, cool. Like one less thing I gotta do, so because they don't know what they're missing out, So it's just like, but for us, it's like we know what that book is about. We know like how it connected with us. We know it was like, oh, I never thought about it like that, So it's kind of like people missing out on things they don't even know they're missing out on, So I think it's more of affecting the generation after me and kind of providing them with full context of a worldview.
That's what Fahrenheit 451 was all about.
So the next question is for anyone on the panel. Acknowledging that many who challenge book titles express the desire to protect children, theirs and others, relating to what you're saying, Shane, about think of the children. What insights or advice would you offer to address their concerns? Bethany, I don't know if this is something you want to speak to.
Yeah, I sure can. And that's something I really looked as I was looking through a lot of the articles that have come out lately. I didn't really see a lot of solution to the problems, right? So it was great to hear about I joined, the freedom to read, but I didn't see a lot of that. Like, what are teachers doing? What are we doing? And that scares me a little bit because we do hear from a lot of our pre-service teachers and a lot of our teachers who are going out into the field. And you probably heard this from librarians as well, that they're just afraid to lose their jobs. So they get all this instruction from us and we empower them and we advocate and here's what you need to do and talk to your administrators and show up at the school board meetings and advocate for yourselves. But they're afraid to do that. I think it just kind of falls on deaf ears after they get up in the field. So I really was kind of looking for a way. I found a couple articles on some people who would sit outside of school board meetings with reading banned books, or the banned book club. I want to join that. It sounds like a lot of fun. But I think just talking with parents and having meetings at schools just to show parents, all of the wonderful literature that's available. And like we said, have you read the whole book cover to cover? I think that a lot of people don't. They see just a cover of a book or the title and it scares them and they're not really seeing the book for what it is. So yeah, I really think just educating our parents and, instead of having to meet with angry parents all the time, we need to sit and hear them out, but also present the viewpoint from, look, we're trying to show your children a larger world than what they have here and what's wrong with that.
from a political perspective, again, just on the legalistic front, it's the viewpoint discrimination thing again. But there's so much research that tells us when people see themselves in a given thing, and this can apply to anything. If you have a more diverse government, more diverse people are going to feel like they can actively engage the government. If you have a more diverse literature, more people are going to be engaging in literature. And that's what I keep coming back to, is that it's their ideas, right? We see the people not wanting to read they're not wanting their kids to be exposed to like same-sex relationships. Well, they're gonna run into them at some point or another. They're going to have questions. Sorry, my brain is like derailing right here. Give me a second. And then okay, so we don't want them to see that, but there's a scene in the book with it's a heterosexual sex scene. That's okay, right? So in a sense, really, we're engaging in this viewpoint. We're engaging in this viewpoint discrimination. And when you ban something, like Dante said, you ban something, it just makes kids want to do it more. Tell kids not to do X, well, they're going to do it. I mean, tell them to read everything. Maybe then they'll stop. But as to as to tell them, it's literally just I think all the great things that Michelle and Bethany have said. We just have to find a way to get that through to them, and get them to trust the messenger source.
Thank you. Last question is for all the panelists. Just to kind of wrap things up. Would anyone like to share their thoughts on what they think, what's to come in the future? Should the increase in challenges continue, what does this mean for the education system? What does it mean for libraries, politically, socially? What do you think we can look forward to in terms of this?
I'll start on this one too, because frankly it scares me. We've these advocacy groups, and we've seen the same thing in reading instruction, where we've had a lot of grassroots movement on the part of parents, so much so that it's changed the way we are now teaching. We're now back to 1980s and drilling and killing our students with phonics instruction versus small group instruction of reading real books. So they're going real books from the classroom. We've kind of seen the power shift. Well, we've seen a big power shift now from schools and teachers over to parents and local groups. So basically what's happening is these book bans are really undermining professional discretion of educators and librarians when it comes to matters of education, right? We're just like when you go see your doctor, I hope that when I go see my doctor, she is reading the latest journals and she knows better than I do what to tell me and what to give me to take or what I need to do. I trust her, right? So, but we're not seeing this right now on the part of people trusting schools and trusting teachers who are going to school, getting state licensure, that says we are qualified to teach in our schools. Sorry, my brain just it's November 1st, can you tell? But yeah, this really scares me because it does disrupt potential for the relationships and trusting relationships, right, between parents and teachers and administrators. And I have, and thinking about the future, like I said, it's because I work a lot with our pre-service teachers, right? So that's why I got into this, because I wanted to work with teachers on that end before they got out to the schools to see what effect I could have on creating these pre-service teachers. But I want to share with you, so I have a friend who teaches our children's literature class right now, a former doctoral student, and I had her gather some information. I just want to share with you some quotes that they said. These are our pre-service teachers and how they're feeling. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Obviously, our teacher shortage right now is evidence, right, of what's happening, right? Why would people want to get into a profession when they don't feel like they have advocacy behind them, power, control over what they know about reading instruction, providing books to children, etc. But so one student said, as a parent, I believe censoring books is wrong. Censoring books is often classist, racist, sexist, and or homophobic. Teachers should consider parents' input, but one or a few parents should not have the ability to determine what is in the curriculum. As a teacher, I will be willing to push back against this in support of my literature choices. I will always have a sound reason for my choices. Another said, the issues in banned books are real people issues. The issues may be uncomfortable for some, but they are real. Children need exposure to reality. And one more, these are all very important topics that students must be exposed to in order to learn. It is not okay to ignore or play down the severity of situations. It can be dangerous. So I love hearing our service teachers. That's exactly what I want to hear them saying. So anyway, I thought I would just share that.
Education has always been political. And if you think about, just think about social studies class, right? It's effectively political indoctrination. But when we start banning ideas, we create a very skewed view of reality. So let's take for instance like the 1836 project or Abbott's project, which effectively whitewashes Texas history. Or we take Donald Trump's 1776 project, which Biden hit the pause button on, but I would imagine should a DeSantis, Abbott, or Trump be president in the future, it's coming back. And it serves to whitewash history. It serves to erase narratives and erase stories. And what that does is it takes these marginalized groups and effectively tells them your experiences, your voices don't matter. And at that point, your citizenry is, it's not as engaged. Your citizenry doesn't really understand all the populations they're in, and at that point, real people suffer. Now, as for the future, what it holds, we've seen over the past 15 years or so real political shifts at the state and local levels. The further you go down the political tree towards the more local levels, those are more likely to, you're going to see more kind of like hardline Republican control down there in school boards. You're going to see more of that like in the levels where these kinds of policies can be implemented. I'm a little bit more optimistic than you are, Bethany, about the future. But
that's because you're not in the schools.
I mean, I have friends who are teachers, and the stories I hear, it's like, I mean, I always thought like teaching high school government would be kind of fun. But when I hear things, I mean, all you have to say are 2 words to convince me not to star test. Yeah. But, I'm a little bit more optimistic, but the solution is really to vote. And I remember a day in the fall of 2020, I was teaching state and local government, I think it was, and I asked my students, it was right around the election, how many of y'all plan to vote? And I saw virtually every hand go up. And when we think about generations, every generation loves to say the generation after is taking this country to bad places. It is time-honored. I remember my grandfather telling me how my generation's screwing things up, and I was like 6 years old, right? I'm a millennial. I feel like millennials, we did okay. We started the assignment the night before. We kind of was very half-hearted. Gen Z, they impressed the heck out of me. They are politically engaged. They are informed. So to those of you who are Gen Z in here, save us, please. So I'm a little bit more optimistic as to what the future holds, but if the bans continue, are we going to see more challenges? Yes, we're going to see more. Are they going to come to colleges and universities? Probably. Although the legal basis to push back is a lot stronger at that level than it is. It's hardest to push back in the K-12 setting. It's easier to push back at the community level, but levy some stuff. at the universities it's easier to, but we're probably gonna see, it's probably gonna get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, so what I think as far as the future holds, and I feel like my whole reason as for being on the panel is like, for this question. So I'm kind of I don't want to say a product of this a product of this idea rather, because my mom kind of did the same thing with me. So it would be like, for her, I really couldn't go to the adult section. Like I couldn't go to that. I had to stay in the kids section. Let's just say that. And so then the kids section got very boring. Like it was so boring. No, not now. It was just like the same stories over and over again. I was like, oh my gosh. And then like I literally like stopped reading and stuff. So and then she finally, allowed me to go to the adult section. Like, look, now I'm here. You know what I mean? So it's just like I feel as though they're like children are going to understand there has to be more out there, like books just can't be like this or can't be silencing and stuff. And then another question is like, then what are they gonna read instead? Like what books are you gonna introduce that you want kids to focus on that are going to somehow prepare them for the world like outside? Like even I know a lot of people advocate for religious books and stuff like that, like really like theories or beliefs. So like books like the Quran or the Bible, like even if you take those books, I mean like the climactic event of the Bible was a dude getting tortured, So it's kind of like either way, you build this fire that you can't control. So you really can't give them anything without harming yourself. You know what I mean? So it's a hard thing to do, but looking forward to the future, I think in a sense, it's not going to be as easy to force people to do something, because I do believe, like, as far as my generation, we're really good at pushing back. So it'll be very hard to do that, and I can only say the same thing for the generation after us. But no, yeah, I mean, I'm here, so I think we have a chance. So I'm optimistic.
My comment was budget, how it affects the budget, because I work for the public library. So if we end up having budget cuts because people are upset with us, that affects our services, our programs, our staff, access to materials. So the more restrictions, the fewer staff to help you. So the whole library is to help those who need that extra boost, can't afford to go out to Barnes and Noble and buy the book, or they don't have internet access at home. Because do you know how much a printer toner costs? So that's what the public library is for, to help those, as a fallback. And as Ms. Woodruff already said, how it affects the librarians who are thinking of going somewhere else and doing something else because they don't want to have that question after they've already done their job as they saw it. And by the way, the Bible has been challenged.
I just want to say thank you to our panelists for sharing their perspectives and sharing their knowledge about this particular issue. And I just want to say that conversations like the one that you are participating in and we are part of are so critically important, because I think that your comments today really reminded me of what is at stake for our future, and also that we still have collectively and as a community and as a society, we have a lot of work to do. To ensure that the free flowing of ideas and to again kind of light that fire in the next generation right, to challenge anxiety things. So, all right, just a round of applause for our panel. We do have some time for some Q&A. If anybody would like to ask any follow-up questions for our panelists?
I actually have a comment. I was in the library field long before I got my library degree. So I'm going to tell you, for 30 years, I've been doing banned book displays. And I've had some great students, assistants, and one fabulous student who had a mother who was a teacher did a display for me. And when you talked about fire, I remembered. She took and made fire, put a garbage can underneath it, and we had books coming out. The biggest thing when we do it at Del Mar and other places is students go in and go, oh my goodness, I read that book. Why is this on the banned book list? And you start that discussion. Now, in one of my library classes, we had to write about censorship. So I looked at the list and I'm going, my favorite children's book is on here. Why? It's where the wild things are.
Yeah.
It's felt because the monsters scare little kids. Just as an example.
I had a question. I was just like in some of the discussion. I don't have kids, and I'm always wondering, like, when they challenge the books on the level at the school, do schools have the ability to say, well, then your kid won't be able to check that book out? You know, why is that not the answer? Like, your kid won't get to check that out, or is that just not? Schools can't do that where they say you're limited to this reading section, or like you said, your mom limited you, but do libraries, you know, get to limit? Like, is there a code in the system that says this student couldn't check out anything beyond this level or something? I don't know. That's what I was just kind of wondering. Why is that not the answer?
I think Mary may have been to answer this one.
Well, that should be the answer.
At the school district level, that does happen. Sometimes it depends on the policies of the individual school district.
It does, and different library systems handle it differently, but ultimately, it is the parent's responsibility to talk to the child about what is okay for your family and what is not okay. If, for example, you know, I don't want my child reading about ghosts, then I have that conversation with my child, and my child knows they better not come home with a book about ghosts. Because it's not really, when you have one school librarian and you've got, you know, 600 kids on an elementary campus, they're doing self-checkout because there's no clerical assistance. So it is hard for the librarian to monitor what every child checks out. So it really becomes the student's responsibility to know what their family is okay with and what they're not.
If I could address that, I am a K-12 librarian. I'm actually at the high school level, but we talked about this, and so I know what my librarians of the littles say is they tell the parent, you know, I don't have the ability to monitor every single thing that your child checks out, but if you would like to come to school on library day and monitor, you know, and help your child choose the books you would like to have, then that's the way they do it. Is give it to the parents and say, if you want to come help your child, please do.
It's the parent's responsibility.
And I've had parents call me at the high school and request the same thing. Well, a lot of my checkout is done by student aides. And so what I tell the parent is, I'm sorry, I can't do that because it's a confidentiality issue. I can't tell other kids that you don't allow your child to check out this book or this type of books. You know, because you don't want me talking about your kid to another kid, and I'm not going to do that. And so what I tell them is, please have the discussion with your child and make sure that they are aware that they are not allowed to check out books about ghosts or witches or whatever the topic is. And And that's just the way I handle it, as a confidentiality issue, because I'm sure they don't want me talking about their kid to other kids either. So, but I just want to make a comment about the whole causing somebody discomfort. Math causes me discomfort. Can we bear math?
What's wrong with discomfort?
How do we learn this when
It makes me feel angry.
Yes.
So at Corpus Christi Public Libraries, we have two joint facilities. Flower Bluff High School is a joint facility with the Hart Library, and then the Garcia Library is a joint facility with Caffey Middle School, which is with the Corpus Christi Public Library. CCISD. Yeah. So at Flower Bluff, that's easy because it's a high school. And that's interesting because they have interfiled collection. So everything on the shelf is available both to a person with a public library card or a student with a Flower Bluff library card. So not an issue there. The issue is with that middle school. So when you walk into Garcia Library, which is our smallest library in the system, unfortunately, they have a wall of what is the ISD collection. So when this list came out and ISD was told to pull those books, our librarian told their librarian if their student wanted to check out the book and we had it in the Garcia Library, they could go through the wall, use their CPEPL library card, which we do not monitor, and they could check it out. So,
part of what kids are supposed to learn in reading instruction is how to self-select their own materials. And so that when you're allowing them to go to the library and choose what they want, they are self-selecting, and that is what a reader does.
And when they come up to me at Neyland, and the parent is, have you read this book? This is your opportunity to have a discussion with the kid. You know, discuss your own family values. Share what did the kid learn about them. The interesting thing about my band book club is that it is older adults, mostly, because it's in the middle of the day. And we're reading classic books, and some of them have never read this. Some of them read it back in high school when it was assigned reading, and that was it. And oh my gosh, did you know all of this happened in Mockingbird? Oh my gosh. And so we have a whole discussion about, you know, what you pick up as a kid and what you pick up later in life. And some of these books I read when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s, and I pick up something different every time, which is why they're classics. So, yes, I love that. It's your turn to have a discussion.
So I know that I think it was in Michelle, you had already mentioned that the Bible had been challenged. I distinctly remember in my elementary, I think in the second or third grade, there was a student in my class who checked it out, but I remember the librarian and teacher was like, "Are you sure? It's long and it's trying to discourage him from checking it out," but they didn't stop him. But it just amazes me that the Bible being having such heavy topics is allowed in elementary schools, while some books that are talking about safe sex aren't being allowed in high schools when teenagers and even some elementary junior high, that's starting to become something that kids are talking about or learning about. curious about it, so that I feel like it's just appalling to me how some have, like, they're just kind of picking and choosing what is allowed and what isn't allowed in schools.
It makes me curious how the book ended up in their collection to begin with. Did they buy it, or was it donated to the school? And the power of the librarian who added it to the collection thought it was worth having in her collection. And then here's a kid who actually checked it out, and so yay. She'll keep it for another 5 years at least. That's my criteria. If the book got checked out in 5 years, we keep it on the shelf. But if it sat there for 5 years and didn't get checked out, then obviously nobody was really interested.
And then I had the opposite issue where I wasn't really told that I couldn't read anything. For the most part, I was always reading. It was a joke that I was going to be all they got for Christmas, or if I got in trouble, I wasn't allowed to read. But I actually would take books like everywhere, but then I'd finish reading and I'd get bored and I'd call my mom, and she was like, you should download this app called Wattpad. And I don't know if any of you are familiar with it, but an 8-year-old probably should have it on the app. So it's just like, it definitely is like parents need to be talking about it to their kids about what they're comfortable with their kid reading.
Now you can download an app called Access 360 through the public libraries of Hoopla. They carry kids' books on, which that's one thing about the issue with all these challenges. We fought so hard to have these books published to begin with. Talk about the 80s. And so finally the publishers are reflecting our communities. And then we had the challenge of getting kids to read. Thank you, Harry Potter, which has been banned and challenged. Don't learn Latin, because you might make a spell. But we fought so hard and then book budgets. We've taken all these cuts, and public library has 3 expenses: materials, staff, and all those utilities to keep us open. So you can't cut the utilities because people need lights and electricity. And people demand those books, so it might be staff that gets cut. But so we've been fighting the good fight for a long time, and then to have so many challenges.
One more thing, it's also just like, honestly, I didn't pay attention to the issue for a while, but I just remember growing up and I was like, it's been book week, like, read these books, they cover a lot of like interesting topics and important themes, and like, I feel like it was implemented at least into within my schools that it's important for us to not be banning books, and then now it's becoming such a big call for us to start banning books. It's just surprising to me overall.
Any further questions, comments?
I wanted just to say, sorry. I wanted to say something from the librarian standpoint. We are now being trained differently when it comes to collection development and being recognized in books, Dante. Because for a while there, we would get a review and it would say, oh yeah, this does this and this. But now we're taking it a step further and investigating the author and seeing who is this author? And we're at our district meeting for Texas Library Association about 3 years ago, we had a speaker who wrote this particular book and said, my daughter was not represented in the books that she was reading in her K through 12 or her public library. So we're making progress.
Yes, I actually have a question. When we talk about all these book bans and the reason why we should read, it's actually making someone who wants to read a certain area because, it's that lack of reading and being exposed to different ideas and experiences. But the thing that always comes back to me is, I keep asking this question, why is this happening now, right? And I know we just went to it a little bit already, but it's, when are we going to get to the part where we're comfortable about speaking of maybe it's a mechanism for achieving the ability to maintain control by particular sectors of society? Because we have some history buffs here, and I love history in the sense that we've seen these things happen. These are all cyclical, right? So human society pretty much lives like a pendulum. We react, go to the extreme and then come back because you say this is too far, we have to adjust. We've seen many civilizations, many government, many societies change because of that. And we tend to wait until we get to that critical point where we say we can't do this anymore and react. This is also feels some reacting. So I'm kind of questioning when will we get to the point where we can talk about that a little bit more than fearful? Because I can't help but think about how furries pedagogy of the oppressed, right? Because it's like you're coming in and you're going to be the savior of these people, but only to end up being the oppressor yourself, right? That's being the rescued. And I see that sort of parallel in what's happening. So that's the perspective I kind of hope someone can speak to.
As you're asking the question, man, I just kind of slid the microphone over to me. Yeah, you sound like, ooh, yeah, this is a question for me. Well, I'm gonna answer first with a quote from one of my favorite sci-fi series. Dante, I'm also a huge sci-fi fan. I want to exchange recommendations with you. Battlestar Galactica. This has all happened before, and this will all happen again. And you've seen this before. So go back to the 1950s. Anything that was even remotely, sympathetic to communism was being challenged and banned on, national security grounds. And it's a joke amongst political scientists. Do not read the Communist Manifesto on an airplane. It's just don't do it. But bans, control of information. Those are absolutely the tools. Those are absolutely the tools of oppression. I think that the current wave of bans is more about swelling grassroots support, which is in and of itself part of a broader political agenda. We do come on moments in history that we call constitutional moments. Those are moments when we fundamentally change what the Constitution itself means. So, the Civil War was, of course, a constitutional moment. The Civil Rights Movement was absolutely a constitutional moment. The Progressive Era, this is like the early 20th century. There's things like federal income tax, things like, 8-hour workday, things like that come out of that. Arguably, the New Deal was a constitutional moment. And ironically, the Progressive Era got a major boost by is it room full of librarians? Is it Upton Sinclair or Sinclair Lewis, The Jungle, about the meatpacking plants? Upton Sinclair. Yeah, I always reverse those two. But yeah, that really prompted, the foundation of the FDA and stuff. Could, what's going on in society right now prompt a constitutional moment? Yeah, probably will. Will book bans be the central feature? No. Will they be a feature? Oh yeah, definitely. At this point, I'm kind of having to project out, and I'm going to give you the classic political scientist answer as to what's going to happen. It depends. It depends on a lot of things that happen, in the upcoming days, but when I say the upcoming years, really. But yeah, this is about a bigger, broader power struggle about what it means to what the country means, whether or not, change is accepted, or we kind of cling on to some idealized past version thereof. But time will come.
I would also like to say that that's also, even if you look outside the context of like the U.S., but like even like world history, that's kind of like another mechanism of how like people would conquer civilizations is by like burning their libraries down, like where all the scholars kept their knowledge. So as far as like they would just go, they may have modern technology or advancement or weapons or whatever, but they don't have any information retained on how to like construct these things because it all got burned to the ground. So now they're like what? And back then, once you lose all that, you're like thousands of you're behind, and one races to power. So I think for the band now, it's kind of you can't burn anything down now because it's digital. Like we have these books online now, so it's kind of like okay, well, how can I make a blockade of what I want this to happen and how I want this to happen? Well, don't read this and don't read this because it's not. I don't believe so. I don't believe it's like the theory, but I think it's the spark of like I wonder. It's like wondering. Wondering is like very dangerous. You know what I mean? So it's kind of just like it's not I don't want them to know about this, but rather I want you to know about this, but the way I tell it to you. You know what I mean? So it's not in the sense of don't have no idea what this is. It's just let me tell you before you have this or read whatever, so they can't burn anything down now. They can't just fully take anything out. So now it's kind of modifying what it is. So that's my tip on it.
Any other questions or comments you'd like to share?
I guess this is a comment or a question, or both. It kind of ties into the why now, and I love these responses. But I have heard somebody mention, I think it was actually in our beginning session, one of the groups that's been very involved, Moms Against it turns out like there's educational, there's money in that group to try to actually change our education system, our K-12, our public education system. And I'm curious, and maybe this is more of a question for you, how serious a threat do you think that is to?
I think it's, like I said, with our reading instruction, these groups really overhaul, and Leah, teacher, can tell you that right now, the former elementary, now middle school teacher, huge policy implications and huge implications for classroom reading instruction. It's been completely turned on its head by really starting from these grassroots groups just a few years ago. People who aren't teachers, the one leading the way, who has had the support from this, her name is Lisa Motes, has not taught AU in her life. And she is now pretty much directing, and CCISD is one of the schools using one of her big programs. So that's where I don't want to sound not optimistic, but that's what scares me, is people making decisions like that. So if they can do that, I think they can successfully come in and like you said, they're circumventing school district policies, just running into a school board and taking over. I think there's power there.
The thing, once we start thinking about grassroots groups, a lot of times grassroots groups, and particularly in this instance, they're not really grassroots. They're more of what we call astroturf. And I'm serious. That's literally the term in the margins of the textbook. Mackenzie can tell you she read that chapter. She took 23 political science 2305. Yeah, and she's like, yeah, sorry for calling you out. So, a lot of times they're coordinated, right? There's coordinated messaging, and a lot of times it does come from somebody throwing a ton of money at an issue. And, historically, go to a school board meeting, you're going to be the only person sitting in the audience. I remember voting in a school board race when I was living in Idaho. It was a special election in April. I I got there like 5 minutes before the polls closed. They told me I was the third person that day. Yeah, so turnout matters, right? And we have seen, school boards becoming politicized. And, who is it that sits historically on school boards? There are people who want to, you get some people who are just, like the retired teacher who wants to give back, the librarian who really cares. But a lot of them are, just aspiring politicians. You get your feet wet somewhere. So, this is where voting becomes critically important. This is where speaking out becomes critically important. And you create a policy space, which, Moms for Liberty has done. Well, it's very likely opposition groups spring up. And really the only thing that it takes in order to start an interest group is it takes people who care and it takes resources. And the main resources we talk about are time, which, let's be real, none of us have that. It is skills. It is the skills to know how to get up at a microphone and speak. It is the ability to do the research, to speak to the topic, to the issue, and really, that's literally all it takes to start an interest group. Interest group's not a dirty word. It just means people who come together because they care about something. And so Moms for Liberty, again, scary possibilities, they can be countered. Won't succeed everywhere, but that's terrifying about CCIC. Really is.
It's just another stat to back that up. So there's a company in North Texas that is actively contributing to these special interest groups. In 2021, they funded about $400,000 towards school board races. This year, they're funding over $1 million.
You talk about the cell phone company? Got the word liberty in the name, I think, but
Patriot.
School board races are getting incredibly politicized.
Question back here.
There's just a, need to bring it down any further, but it seems like there's just a huge, among that group and those groups, there's just a huge distrust of education in general. It's almost like an us versus them. I remember about a year ago, I'm gonna misquote, when the president said something like, "These are our kids," people lost their minds. And there was a Moms for Liberty meeting. Our school librarian sent me a message, and on their agenda was how to monitor teachers' social media. It's scary.
That was the summer.
Yeah,
in the summer. Yeah. They were doing trainings.
Yes.
How to monitor teachers' social media.
So if I read a banned book, I should put it on my social media.
Yeah, right there.
It's a class. They're so good. So good.
I just want to ask about the program you mentioned. I am with CCISD. I'm not familiar with it, so I wondered if you could tell me what you're referring to.
The letters program, LETRS letters. Just a big push for phonics.
Okay,
period.
yeah, which I think the district adopted around 2019 or so.
Mm-hmm. That's what years. Yeah, that's what years. Yeah. There's just been and it's really, Texas is really pushing it. It's and most other states as well, but it's just a push to go back to mostly phonics-based instruction to the detriment of reading comprehension, vocabulary, reading motivation, giving children access to relevant books, and just drilling them to basically be word callers. But that's happening everywhere. It's not just CCISD. I don't want to put them out there. It's filtering. It's everywhere.
What's in the state standards as well?
Yeah, science teaching reading. Yeah.
I just want to mention from like a student standpoint, like growing up. I don't like microphones. Microphones, I don't like being really loud. But like I grew up and I started reading Harry Potter in high school. That's how I got into like really loving reading. But I read like half the classic banned books, like Fahrenheit 451, and Like, I think that the classroom really needs to be a place for discussion. Like, that's the place to talk about hard topics because you have somebody who's like fully educated on that topic. And it's like, if you have questions or don't understand something or like really are against something, that's that place where you have that roundtable discussion with the rest of your class who have other opinions where you can all come together and just talk about it instead of like going to your parent. Sometimes your parents have very focused, mindsets. They're like, oh, well, I don't like the LGBTQIA, but you might be LGBTQIA, and you can't talk to them about that, but other people in your class might be. So it's like the classroom really needs to be a place of discussion instead of just being like, oh, well, you can't read that book. That one's dangerous. Like, I remember reading Fahrenheit 451, and I was like, oh, they're burning books. Like, this is terrible. And she was like, well, yeah, we had a discussion about it, and I watched Footloose, and I was like, wow, so people did this. This is crazy. And I was like, it's just like such interesting conversations that are brought up by books that people think that need to be banned. So it makes me sad that people are trying to ban books because they ignite such controversial subjects.
It teaches critical thinking.
Yeah.
How can you have discussions over really, really boring books, right? Some of you, if you've never checked out Penny Kittle's work or Kelly Gallagher, who wrote a book called Read-A-Side, Penny Kittle's done a lot of work in high schools and just getting adolescents to love reading. And of course, the key was let them read what they want. Imagine that. Anyway,
Which is why we have a lot of graphic novels.
Yeah, that including Frankenstein. Sensibility.
Any other questions or comments?
I was going to add like a little happy story of where it works right. So there was a librarian who was assigned to work at a juvenile justice center. This juvenile justice center, they had a library for the students or the kids that were there. The library was age appropriated, selected. The selections were based, I think, by the director of the justice center. And it's like, yeah, these are age appropriate. Librarian came in, saw the collection, and said, these aren't going to work for these kids. Got a bunch of books about young adults experiencing crime and part gangs and things like that. The kids loved it. They connected to it. They were reading things. They were having discussions. They looked forward. The library went every other Friday. They loved Library Day. When they knew the librarian was coming, that meant they were going to get to talk about their lives, about what they read, how that reflects. And this librarian was able to connect with these students. And that was something that hadn't been done. So the intentionality of the librarians, that librarian went in and was like, this collection's not going to work. And was able to bring in books that actually connected with the community that librarian was serving. So we mentioned it, whether it's an educator, a teacher, a librarian, there is a purpose behind the types of selections that happen. And it does connect with the students, and it does, give that opportunity for discussion. And unfortunately, when they're not, librarians and educators are not allowed to do that, it pulls that opportunity away. And I think that's unfortunate. But I just wanted to share the happy story about how when it does work, it works well. So.
And that's one of the issues with ISDs when they don't have a librarian in the library and they've gone to a media specialist. Their reading scores don't. And then they wonder what's going on that the kids can't read. Well, they didn't have that librarian who can make that connection. And I look forward to hearing in 30 years when those kids go back to the librarian. Oh, you're the one who gave us that book, and it was so wonderful. And now I'm an engineer with NASA. Oh, wow!
Any other questions or comments?
I just wanted to make a comment on and expand on something Michelle said about, a lot of times when people try to ban books, they say, well, I don't mind if other people read it, but it doesn't need to be in the library. They can go to Barnes & Noble and they can get it. That is such a privileged viewpoint. I mean, we provide the resources for people that can't. There are a lot of people that cannot afford to go to Barnes and Noble and purchase something whenever they want to read it. And so, when we're taking things out,
They can't even get to the public library because they can't get on the bus.
So
I mean,
my
the library is the best resource for the kids.
My district was a Title I district. We had 80% of our kids were on free and reduced lunch and living in poverty. And that is the library is the only place that they can have access to these materials. So I think we need to not forget that as well when we're talking about this issue.
Lots of kids have never purchased their own one book of their own.
Right.
Thank you all for your lovely questions and comments. All right, I guess let's have a round of applause for Thank you so much for attending our
I just want to say once again, thank you to everybody who's on the panel. Thank you to our guests who came from TLA. Thank you all for attending. It's a really critical conversation that we all need to be engaged in right now. Get out and vote. I think that was definitely one of the themes of today is one way we can all have impact is vote and read a banned book and start a banned book club. And yeah, so thank you all so much.